Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming to the Civic Exchange 11th Energy Forum. When we started 2 or 3 years ago, we never thought we'd be doing so many, but now I'm pretty sure we'll be doing a lot more because obviously energy, development, climate change, environment, these are going to be the big issues going into the future. So thank you very much for joining us. We won't have a formal break today because we want to finish by 11:30. The room is only available till then today. Many thanks to PCW for, again, giving us this room free of charge for having this conference. So whenever you feel thirsty, please feel free just to get up and go out and get tea and coffee. I think that's just the easiest way for us to manage this. So as I said, don't be shy. Just go and come back. I'm Christine Lau. I'm the CEO of Civic Exchange. We're a non-profit public policy think tank. What we're going to do today is have a look at renewable power and have a look at renewable power, particularly in the context of southern China, including Hong Kong. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask my colleague, Andrew Lawson, to do just a very short 7-minute sweep of the basic issues of renewable power in terms of China. Then I'm going to introduce the 3 main speakers for today. They're going to give us their presentation, and then we'll invite 2 other friends to come and be to provoke, asking questions and commenting on the 3 speakers. And then, of course, the floor is then open to all of you. And I'll introduce the speakers and our provocateurs in a moment. Perhaps now I can just turn over to Andrew Lawson, who will give us a very quick rundown of renewable power in China.
Thanks very much, Christine. Can people hear me down the back? Good. Go to the first slide. On the first slide, I've just listed the main categories of technologies that are relevant to a discussion of renewables in China. I should add that sometimes nuclear is added to these categories by Chinese officials and sometimes not. There are also some other terms used, such as clean energy and low emission energy, which are not exactly the same as renewables, but there's a large degree of overlap. The overall picture of renewables in China is one of plans for massive expansion. And China has already embarked on a fairly major course of development in hydroelectricity, but is coming up against some limitations, which I'll talk about later. What might fill the gap in its ambitious plans to have for its renewable plans out to 2020 is probably these 2 here, wind and solar. If we could move on, please, Eric. The NDRC Outline plan that the NDRC published early this year mentions renewables in about 7 areas of clean energy development. And I'll just run through those very quickly. The first is in the manufacture of equipment for the energy industries. This is a picture of the Suntech laboratories producing PV panels. And a very quick comment about production of PV panels. China produces something like 1.7 gigawatts of panels, or panels that can produce that sort of power, but it exports 99% of those panels. And so in ramping up the development of renewables over the next 11 or 12 years, we could expect that China will make a lot more use of its own capabilities internally. Next slide. Infrastructure and generation, another area mentioned in the NDRC plan. The production of energy efficiency products and appliances, including cars. Next slide. It dwells on innovation, and this is a picture of the Hong Kong Science Park, where a few weeks ago was launched a new research and development centre for solar energy and thin film photovoltaic. Next slide. There's also mention of reform in the administration of energy policy, supply of energy to rural areas, including the use of off-grid renewable technologies, and there's mention of protecting the PRD and China against volatile price fluctuations for energy resources. Moving on to the big picture of energy in China, this is China as a whole. It's all of its energy use, including electricity. And this first slide, what dominates here, of course, is coal, with about 7 or 8% renewables, and most of that, 90% of that, is hydro. This slide here shows the dominance of electricity. Electricity has grown massively as a share of this pie over the last few years and is expected to continue to do so. Next slide. This one shows the official targets. This is currently, we're about 7 or 8% renewables. The official targets are wanting to move that to 15%. I should mention that the official targets we've presented here are from the official documents, such as the 11th five-year plan and other official documents. I'll later put up some unofficial targets, and they're taken from reports and comments by senior energy officials that have been made since the publication of the 11th five-year plan. So, next slide. If we just look at that part of the overall energy picture that is electricity, this is what it looks like in terms of current and targets. This first pie here is current, and low emission sources and renewables taking up about a quarter or generating about a quarter of electricity. Moving out to 2020, in the unofficial and official targets, we're looking at approximately doubling the total amount of energy in terms of gigawatts. And in the unofficial targets push the low emission energy sources out to 35% of total electricity. And I should mention that low emission in this context includes nuclear. Next slide. If I could quickly mention the three big names in renewables in China, say something about them: hydro, wind and solar. Starting with hydro, this is a map of the potential for hydro in China, with the circle showing the potential for each province and the red slice showing the amount of that potential that has already been exploited. If we added up all that potential, we would come to this figure, about 400 gigawatts. That is a theory, and we've used something less than half. China has exploited something less than half of that. That is a theoretical limit of economic potential for hydro. Realistically, there are environmental and political constraints that will mean that China will reach the limit well before the limit of hydro development, well before 400 gigawatts. For instance, there's been, this is a recent report, headline from a recent report where Premier Wen intervened to halt the plans for the construction of a major hydro development in Yunnan province. And that map I showed you before, the areas of big potential are in the southern provinces like Yunnan and Sichuan, where some of the rivers are international rivers, and so there are political constraints to international political ramifications of damming the rivers on the Chinese side. So there are some constraints to huge, a lot more development of hydro. So where might the gap be taken up to fill these ambitious plans? It could be wind for a start. This is a map of wind potential, so the darker areas show the areas that are best for generating electricity through wind technologies, and they're in the north and in the west. And I should also mention oceans, since ocean-based wind electricity could constitute about 3/4 of the total potential of wind. If we added up all the potential, there's about 1,000 gigawatts of potential, and we've only used, not very much, only used about 1% of that potential. Next slide. These are the targets for wind against the current situation, and so we can see the unofficial targets are looking at something like a 8 to 10-fold increase in wind on its current figures. This is a map of solar resources in China, and the red or the more redder colours are the best places in China to produce electricity through solar technologies, and you'll see that's in the far western provinces. I haven't got a slide of the current exploitation of solar resources against overall potential, because the overall potential is almost limitless. If we could take just the energy from a tiny dot of the energy that the sun delivers to Earth, we could have all the electricity we wanted. I won't talk more on that because I know Robin Howe, one of our speakers later, is going to discuss that further. But I will show you the figures for what we're currently utilising and what the targets are. So the current solar resource is about 1/10 of a gigawatt, and you'll see in the unofficial figures the targets are pushing that out to expand by more than 100 times. I'll conclude by putting up the maps again of solar potential and wind potential for the whole of China, and just ask you to move from the overall China picture and draw your eye down to Hong Kong and Guangdong. And I'll stop there because I think that would be a good place for Christine to segue into Alexis's presentation. Thank you.
Andrew, thank you very much. And I noted some of you were kind of desperately scribbling down the numbers. Actually, all the PowerPoints and any transcripts that we have, which we will produce after today, they will be on our website. So, if you miss something, don't worry about it. We can send it to you. What I'd like to do now is really go back to, just the last picture. What I'd like to do is, of course, to focus on these two, because this leads nicely to the talk that Professor Alexis Lau is going to give. If you look at these two pictures, you'd say, well, for solar and for wind, southern China doesn't look too hopeful if you're just looking at these two big macro pictures. But, of course, if we're talking about any specific area, then you do need specific research to look at the quality of the renewable resources in that area. So I'm going to ask Alexis Lau, who's actually done specific research looking at the renewable potentials in this area, to share his expertise with you. Then after Alexis Lau, who's with the University of Science and Technology, and I don't think I need to introduce Alexis again because all of you know him so well, he's going to be followed by the Chief Operating Officer, Richard Lancaster of CLP, whom I think, again, I don't need to make further introductions, but he's very well known in the community. You have a power company in Hong Kong that has recently announced major investments in wind power, not far from Hong Kong, in Hong Kong waters. So I think from an investor's and an operator perspective, Richard can tell us about how you make these investments, how he looks at that potential. And perhaps, Richard, I don't quite know how extensive your talk will be, but maybe you can also say something about your investments in China, how you look at a Hong Kong company looking at what are viable investments on the mainland in renewable power. And they're going to be followed by Robin Howe, who is the principal of Iceberg Capital. Robin is probably not many of you have known him yet, but he's one of the finest energy and infrastructure researchers that we have in our community. He's lived in Asia for some 30 years. He's lived in and worked in various countries in Asia, and we're lucky to have him in our midst in Hong Kong. We probably haven't tapped your expertise frequently enough, but perhaps after today, we'll be able to hear more from Robin in the future. Robin's going to talk about solar. So we're going to cover wind, we're going to cover solar. We're not going to do nuclear today. Perhaps that's a subject, an ever-growing sexy subject for the future. But today, I think if we can get a clearer idea of how the academic sector, the business sector, the investors, the operators, how they look at the potential in southern China, I think we'll be very richly rewarded. So if I can ask Alexis to come and share his expertise with us first, and then we'll ask the other two speakers to come up, and then I'll invite them all to sit with us and answer your questions. Alexis.
Thanks very much, Christine. Well, maybe I actually give a little bit of background of myself, because a lot of people here are energy experts. Myself certainly is not. I'm a meteorologist. My background is really studying wind, studying weather, that type of thing. So my background, my perspective is really from this wind, and because we also study whether we need to know the sun, the radiation, and looking at the solar irradiance, and look at the resources of renewable energy. This is basically a result of a project supported mainly by the Innovation Technology Commission, with the support also from CLP, Monso, and a number of other companies. And also one of the collaborators is Dr. Cott here. And so, okay, well, this, I think, again, most of you already know. So this is basically the use of energy in Hong Kong with our RE target 1 to 3% officially is relatively small. Andrew already talked about this, so I would not go into any detail. Basically, China has a 10% and 15% target by 2010 and 2020. And the by 2020, the detail in terms of how many gigawatts Andrew already talked about. But basically, we see a very much difference between Hong Kong's vision and China's vision. And from Andrew's talk, we know that China, this is just the official target. The unofficial one is even higher. What's happening in Pearl River Delta? This is a map that we kind of, it may not be all inclusive, but the green pins are basically wind farms that is already existing. The blue pins are wind farms that are being planned or constructed. And then the red droplets are hydro power. And the the blue ones are pump stations, basically using hydropower. So this, you actually can see that most of the wind are along the shore, and then the hydropower is more up in the mountain area. Okay, so that's the basically actually tell us the distribution in the sense of what are the resources available. And you can also see from here there's really no large-scale solar installation here. Okay. So this is a map from the China Meteorological Agency administration, which is very similar to Andrew's. What we find typically is a map like this. But unfortunately, the scale of this is typically too large scale, and if we want to focus to know our resource, we may not be able to see it clearly from this type of map. And also, a lot of time these are really wind maps. They are not really wind energy map, because they are basically calculated from annual mean wind. So our project was really trying to use in situ or satellite observation to run high-resolution model on an hour-to-hour basis, and then calculate from that the three-dimensional wind field. So we done some simulation up to 1 kilometer resolution around Guangdong, and then done 3 years of simulation, and the result was calculated from there. And we try to get better temporal resolution as well as spatial resolution. And then we also try to add specific technology, because, well, potential is there, but if you put a turbine there, you will find that the turbine is not operating at full capacity in most of the days. So how much does a turbine can get you from this wind field? We also try to estimate, or the sun. Okay. So this is the work that we have done. We use data from a number of government EMSD, CLP provide us data, and we also carry out some data collection in Guangdong in different areas for both solar as well as wind information. I don't want to go into a detail. These are just the results. Like this particular one is the typical yearly average wind field. This is typically you see a lot. People infer from wind field what is the wind energy potential. Okay, so this is just an example, and we have 3 types of domain. The one that I showed today would be the Hong Kong domain and the Guangdong domain. Typically, we have Hong Kong, PRD, and Guangdong. So this one just showing Hong Kong, and you can see that this is mean wind speed at 10 meter. Why I show 10 meter is because this compares with automatic weather station. The model actually have all the way up to several kilometers, but this just shows that a lot of the information is looking at wind maps. So we try to compare with existing one, and you can see that in Hong Kong, well, immediately the higher or the hotter color are over the mountain area and especially over water area. Okay, and because of the wind are mostly from the northeast, so our eastern side of the Hong Kong area has the highest mean wind. So this is the basically the same map, but now changing to the Guangdong domain. And this is for a whole year every month. One of the points I want to make here is that our wind availability are quite variable. You can see from here that, first of all, if you look at such a wide area, most of the wind resources are over the ocean. Over the land area, there are still some area, in particular near the coast, but then there's strong month-to-month variability. If people think about wind power, those details you certainly have to look at. And then this, we have a list of about 50 turbines that we get from basically the specification. We know the power curve. We put the power curve into the system. So just like the wind rolling in the system itself, and then try to calculate how much energy is generated by individual turbine. So this is a map we have done, and by calculating the maximum possible at a location, using in this particular case, using a 60-meter wind field. What we find is that, okay, there are year-to-year variation, and also, if you look at the numbers there, the largest turbine at that time we put in is a 3-megawatt turbine. The maximum maximum energy we get out is about 1. So we get about a load factor of 30%, and that's the maximum we get. A lot of other places we do not get that high number. Okay, so this again, we want to basically estimate what is the load factor that you expect from putting winds over here. The other place we are talking, we're typically seeing 20% in terms of load factor. Another thing that we look at is, okay, we only do calculation for 3 years, which is 2004 to 2006. But there's a lot of long-term variability. So we have looked at also 1994 to 2008 in different automatic weather stations. What is the trend there? You can see the wind seems to have a trend of decreasing all the way up to 2003 and then pick up again. Whether this is a long-term trend, we don't know. But we just caution that there's quite a bit of variability, up to about here about 20% as much. This is a longer record we obtained from the meteorological agencies. And if you can see from 1950 all the way down, there seems to be a downward trend in terms of wind speed. But when we look into this more, I think a lot of this is related to urbanization, because some of these stations are really in the city. So this may not be very representative when you are talking about ocean area. The one that I chose earlier is outlying area. Okay, So another thing is looking at solar energy. What we did is really in collaboration with Chinese U as well as Hong Kong U, basically combining satellite information as well as ground station measurement, try to estimate the solar availability. Here is the solar availability in Hong Kong. If you look at the number, which you can't, is the top is 300, okay? But the point here is it's quite smooth. It's very different from wind. But if you are thinking about none of this really hit the red in the top, which is 300. Most of this is in the middle, around 150 to 200 at most. So this is the available solar radiation on average here. And then if, again, you look at the different months, then you can see, again, a substantial variability in terms of different months, in terms of availability. Even the summer, which you expect to have more sunshine, that may not be true because we are not having too much sunshine for the past few weeks. So that's the reason. And here we do not have estimation really good on to account for something like air pollution. This is really from the cloud because the satellite cannot see air pollution. So we also do similar thing is, okay, we have the resources, we want to put PV in the system and estimate how much energy we get out. Remember, we have about 100 to 200 watt per meter square, but if we put the PV cell, different type of PV cell there, the energy we get is about 30. So the load factor there is about 10%. Okay, so in terms of energy and that. So this will be my second to last line. This is really comparing solar and wind. In a lot of other places, people use 6 meters per second as the threshold to say, okay, if the area has 6 meters per second wind, it has good energy availability. And then sometimes they also use 250 watt per meter square as a good indication for solar energy. So we have shown in this map, the black area is wind speed less than 6 meters per second and the irradiance less than 250. And then the red area is really wind speed larger and irradiance larger than 250. As you can see, there's no red area here. Okay? But if you look at, because our solar radiance is not that high, so we try to lower that number. If we switch it to 125, now we are start seeing some red area or orange area from what I see here, is that, again, the coastal area seems to have both wind and solar, and then a little bit inward, the solar is a little bit higher, but further in, there's a switch between wind and solar. But basically, this is the location where you can have some good wind and solar energy. So it's really along the coastal area. Again, large variability in terms of season. If you want to look at individual season, that's the type of availability we are talking about. So this is the discussion I want to raise is, well, there are good resources along the coast, better offshore. The load factor we are calculating is around 30%, but there's strong seasonal variability. The annual variability, from my judgment, is not really that high. And also, we try to address the question whether using the mean of the annual basis is good enough to calculate the energy rather than hour-to-hour calculation. I think that's okay because the error is about 10 to 20%. So you don't really want to spend that effort. I think to just using the mean wind is pretty good. In terms of solar, the potential for large scale is not good. Except we don't count solar thermal. Solar thermal probably, I think Robin is going to talk quite a bit more about solar, so I won't go into that. But again, we only consider cloud effect, but we do not consider aerosol effect here. And there are also strong seasonal variability. So when we talk about Guangdong, so probably because of the resource limitation, maybe we also need to think about how to use energy resources from outside Guangdong area. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Alexis. And I think before I ask Richard Lancaster to share with us how an investor, an operator, looks at these not so optimal wind resources in Hong Kong, perhaps I can just say that let's refer back to the NDRC plan that you saw earlier. Just because Hong Kong and in Guangdong, we may not have the best renewable potentials, it doesn't mean that the plan doesn't include renewable types of ideas. So, for example, this is an area where people are investing into making products, energy efficiency products, making solar panels, and including in Hong Kong, we now have, I think, quite an interesting opportunity to look at developing thin film solar panels. So I think perhaps this is something that Robin can tell us a little bit more about later on. So I don't want you all to think at this stage, oh, forget renewables, it's not going to work in Hong Kong. So I think one of the ideas today is really thinking more broadly about the challenge of renewable power and the role of both Hong Kong and southern China. So, Richard.